Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. So we're gonna continue with the next chapter in IMU303. We're gonna continue with risk management in Islamic finance. Okay. So for today, what we're gonna do, we're gonna see the risk management framework, and then we're gonna dive just a bit into the next risk analysis process. We're going to use CAMEL. CAMEL is not the animal, okay, but it's a short form of something. Okay, so but is a quite a useful tool that's often used by the risk analysts and risk managers. Okay. So for today, hopefully everyone could understand the risk management, how risk management is done in Islamic finance context. It's actually a bit more compared to the normal finance, conventional finance, because Islamic finance has their own special risks that we're going to talk about later. Okay. So for company or enterprise, right, they would do a enterprise risk management, or ERM for short. Okay, so ERM is basically a firm-wide strategy to identify and prepare for hazards with the company's finance, operation, and objective. Okay, so with this ERM framework or policy, this would allow managers to shape the firm's overall risk position by mandating certain business segment engage with or disengage, right? So you can set the companies to either involve or not involve with particular activities or not. Okay, so usually they would divide into a number of risks, right? So in our case, we divide here into 3 risks. For the first one is strategic risk, second one is a financial risk, and third one is operational risk. Okay, so strategic risks. So strategic risks refer to those risks which emanate from the business model or direction undertaken by a company. Okay, so it is risks that arise from a fundamental decision, right, that direct the stake concerning an organization objectives. Okay, so basically, if you fail to achieve this objective, it is a strategic risk, right? Strategic risks are the risk of failing to achieve this business objective, right? For example, you are the management, you are the managers, so you open your restaurant, you already set up your restaurant to open by mid of this month, right? Okay, so when you set that particular date, right, you have already imputed the finances, right, the revenue that you would have for this month, right, the balance of 15 days, you would already calculated the number of workers that you need, right? So you already employed them to work at the middle of the month, right? And not to mention other stuff, right? Decoration, electricity, water, the food supply, and whatnot, right? So that all particular things, right? Suddenly things happen, so you could not open by the middle of the month, right? So you could only open your restaurant next month, right? So by delaying that, right, by let's say 15 days or a month or so, it would affect significantly on your companies, right? Okay, so that's just one example of strategic risk, right? Okay, next is financial risk. Okay, so financial risk can comprise various types of risks which are capable of affecting the financial performance of organization, right? So I think in terms of financial risk, it would be easier for us to see, right? Because when we are dealing with companies, we always think about money, right? So in terms of financial risk, I think it would be easier for us to understand and comprehend on what this is all about, right? And the third one is operational risk, right? So operational risk is risk which can trigger direct and indirect impact on strategic and financial risk, primarily due to the people, system, and process, right? Okay, so when we talk about operational risk, although we talk about board directors and managers, so they need to incorporate awareness of strategic risk decision into their decision making. We talk about people here, right? The people on the ground, right? When the board make decision, they make a high level decision, right? But for the people on the ground, they might be missing on what the people on top is talking about, right? So for example, the directors or the managers always talk about cost saving, right? So when you talk about cost saving, what you would do, you would cut OT, right? You would cut bonuses for the people on the ground, yeah, right? You would cut the perks and benefits for people who are working, right? So because you want to improve your financial performance, right? But then if the people on the ground who are really working, right, feel dissatisfied and they are really good, so they will leave the company, right? So what will happen, right? This is things that currently happening, that's been happening with the effect of COVID-19, right? So we are talking about hotels, right? So during COVID-19, hotels could not open, so they lay off their staffs, right? So a lot of staffs are being laid off and lost their jobs, right? So these staffs, they look into jobs in other places, right? Because they need to survive, right? So when the situation already trying to return back to normal, and the hotel start to open, start to receive customers, right? What happened was that there are simply just not enough staff, right? And the staff that they undertake, the new staff that they take, is simply not well trained, right? So it causes major disruption and major problems at the hotel, right? And we are not talking only about hotel, we are talking about restaurants, we are talking about so to speak service sectors, right, that previously was affected badly by COVID-19 and trying to return back to normal, and they just simply could not, right? Because the backbone of the service, the backbone of the companies is not there anymore, right? So when you take new people, you need to train them, right? And training process take quite some time, right? So that's a good example of operational risk that may be easier for you to see. Okay. So for the Islamic finance, right? Now we go specific to Islamic finance, and in Islamic finance, because due to the nature of Islamic finance, IFI, Islamic Financial Institution, Islamic financial institution business, they are governed by a unique set of rules because they followed the Quran and Sunnah, right? Okay, so because of this, they are facing with additional risk factors compared with the conventional financial institution, right? They have Sharia risk, right? So they need to monitor their business operation to ensure that they follow the Sharia requirements, right? Because why? Because Sharia laws are the backbone of Islamic finance, where all transactions must be based on Sharia contracts. Okay, So, and because of its unique requirement, Sharia risk also directly correlates with operational and financial risks, right? Okay, so Islamic finance, they talk about Islamic finance being fundamentally different from conventional banking because of the prohibition of riba, right? And then we talk about prohibition of gharar, prohibition of maisir, and there are additions to other restrictions, right? And instead of relying on interest or riba, Islamic financial institutions, they rely on asset-backed transaction or asset-based transaction to generate profit. So let's look into the rules of risk management, right? So there are in here we discuss about 9 rules of risk management, right? So the first one is there is no return without risk, right? So this is the fundamental, the very fundamental of risk, right? If you don't take risk, there is no return, right? Although there are risk-free asset, right? So we're talking about risk-free asset that can generate returns, right? But then the risk-free asset is basically can be written off by inflation, right? So to hedge against inflation, you would still need to take some kind of risk, right? Although yet again there are risk-free assets that can generate a return, right? Okay, so there is no return without risk, and rewards go to those who take risks. Okay, and then the second rule need to be transparent. So risk should be fully understood by the people who involved in it, right? But of course, when you are in the business, you already captured some of the risks, right? You already understood a number of risks, right? But then there are things suddenly happen, right? So things that you could not predict, right? So there are risks there. It's a risk, right? Okay, and then another rules is to seek experience. So risk is measured and managed by people, right, and not by mathematical models. Although there are numbers of mathematical models that are being used to manage risks, right? For example, when you do trade, for example, you do trading, right? You can do trading by computers can trade for you, right? I'm not talking about robo advisors and stuff, no, but this is what mathematical model being used to automatically buy or sell certain stocks. But of course, this is not for layman person. This is employed or being used by asset managers, right? Okay, so but then there are risks of being there can be another risk, right? For example, when the glitch happen or something, right? So but then again, the parameters is set and managed by the people. Okay, another rules is know what you don't know, right? So there are lots of assumptions that we're gonna make during our business decision, right? So for this, we need to question the assumptions that we make, right? For example, we predicted, right? So when we do calculation and stuff, we said that we can get a 5% return when we invest in this particular investment, right? So but then there might be something that can affect our potential return, right? So we need to question those, right? There might be something, right? So why 5%, right? What is our assumptions to make the 5%, right? So need to continue question so that we can reduce the number of unknowns when we make decision making, right? And then another rules is to communicate, right? So when we undertake the risk, we know the risk, and this risk should be discussed openly. Of course, I'm not talking about outside the organization. I mean, when we talk about discuss openly, it would be among the managers, the C-suites, right? The people who make decision, right? So they can make what we call an informed decision, right? And then another rule is to diversify, right? So diversify means putting your eggs into different baskets, so to speak, right? So multiple risks will produce more consistent rewards, right? But then again, there are people who just putting their eggs into one basket and still perform well, right? In that context, maybe we could say that he or she is taking a big risk, right? Higher risk, and potentially he or she can get higher return, right? But then when we diversify, what would happen is minimizing the risk, right? So if something bad happened to one basket, for example, there are 5 or 6 other baskets that may provide a good return, so to speak, right? So and then we need to be disciplined, right? So a consistent and rigorous approach will be a constantly changing strategy, right? So we could not make a constant change, right? So we need to be consistent, right? But then again, if when we are in business, we see the profit is not there, right? We are making a loss, so it's time to make a change, right? The business acumen need to be there, right? And then use common sense, right? So it's better to be approximately right than to be precisely wrong, right? Okay, so you don't want to be wrong, right? So you get right a bit is okay, right? Maybe 20-30% right is okay, but you don't want to be 100% wrong, right? Okay, and then the last rule is return is only half of the equation, right? Because when we talk about return should relate with the risk, right? So you should look into risk return profile, right? So for example, people talk about why you put your money in EPF, for example, right? Let's go direct to the stock market, right? Or why you put your money in ASB? Why you put your money in tabung haji, right? The return is so low, 3%, 4%, right? You can get 10-20% per month in if you invest directly in stocks, right? In the stock market, right? But then you talk about the risk of that, right? What is the risk of losing your money by putting your money in EPF, right? What is the risk of losing your money by putting your money in tabung haji, right? What is the risk of losing your money by putting your money in ASB, right? And what is the risk of losing your money by investing directly in the stock market, right? So people don't talk about the risks, right? They only when they try to ignite your interest or excite you, they often talk about the return, right? But they don't talk about the risk, right? Another classic example is when gold price is increasing, right? So suddenly there will be lots of guru talking about, let's invest in gold. The gold price will keep on increasing. Later you will touch these prices and so stuff, right? Gold price will not go down, right? Suddenly the price go down and they disappear, right? Similar with the property guru, right? When the price goes up, they're always there. Okay, the price of houses will not go down. House is the best asset that you could invest into and stuff and whatever, right? There is no risk by investing in houses. This is the words that they use, right? But then when you are involving and suddenly the house price do go down, right? and if not go down, the price stagnant, right? Stagnant, not moving, right? And if even the price goes up, it just goes up by a bit, and it could not cover the expenses that you take, right? So again, you would need to do a better profiling, right? When we talk about investing in real estate, for example, is not all houses prices will go up, right? There are prices of houses that will go up in certain places, what type of units and whatnot, right? Not all, right? So you need intelligent decision there, right? Okay, not an easy or everything will go up. No, not like that. Okay. So next, we talk about a risk management framework. Okay, so we separate this into three units, right? So the first one is a business unit. Okay, so the business units are the front lines, right? So in other words, they are the people who are involved with the other people, right? They are the people who are involved in finding the business for the companies, right? In this case, the Islamic financial institution, right? So they expose the organization to the risk via acquisition of new businesses, right? And then these people, the front lines, they are guided by risk policies, right? So we already set up a credit policies, market risk, and operational risk policies, right? Simpler words that you can see them, maybe they are managers of the banks, or maybe they are people that you can see at the bank, right? The cashier is one, and also the people who are employed to do for the package, right? So for example, if you want to take financing, you need to meet them, right? You want to apply for credit card, you meet them, right? You want to apply for other type of financing, you meet them, right? So these are the front lines, right? Okay, so they are the person, they are the organization front lines who are employed to meet other people, right? Meet the clients, so to speak. Okay, and the next unit is the risk management unit. Okay, so risk management unit, they act as independent parties from business unit, and their role is to identify and assess risks introduced by business units, right? Okay, so they need to make sure that the risks that the business unit undertake are consistent with the company risk appetite. And they need to follow the risk related policies, right? In other words, when the front lines get a business, they need to send to risk management unit for them to verify first, right? So the business unit cannot make their own decision. They need to have other people to verify for them, right? Okay, so and then the third one is a risk committee. Okay, so the risk committee, they can be at a management level, or they can be also at a board level. Okay, so the risk committee acting as the ultimate authority, they need to control, monitor, or accept risk within the organization, right? So they make decision on risk, right? So they approve a risk policy, and then when there are certain type of businesses, we talk about businesses that involve a huge sum of amount, so they would need to get approval from risk committee first, right, before you can proceed to get approval from the board level, right? Okay, so next one we're going to talk about risk analysis, right? Okay, so generally understanding risk in financial institution can begin by analyzing their business operation, right? So when you want to analyze their business operation, there are multiple tools used, right? So one of it one of the most useful analytical approach is to use CAMEL, right? So CAMEL refers to a short form of 5 things, right? The first one is capital adequacy, second one is asset quality, third one management quality, fourth is earning, and fifth one is liquidity. Okay, so in short, CAMEL. Okay, so the first one, capital adequacy, right? So capital adequacy is in simpler words, do you have enough capital? Right. Okay. So capital adequacy measures a financial institution ability to absorb losses and honor its obligation to its depositors and other shareholders. Right. So if something happened, right, do you have enough reserve to pay all your creditors, right? Okay, so an acceptable level of capital adequacy provide comfort and confidence to a financial institution customers, right? Okay, so how to measure? So to measure capital adequacy, it is measured as a percentage of financial institution capital base against their risk-weighted asset. Okay, so what is risk-weighted asset? Risk-weighted asset means the assignment of risk factors to the asset group owned by the institution, right? So it's quite technical here. You just need to understand in simpler words. If something happened, with given number of risks, can the banks or financial institution pay back their creditors, right? Pay their depositors, right? Can they pay other stakeholders, right? Okay, can they absorb that particular loss, right? Okay, so generally, the higher the percentage, the higher the safety net the organization possesses, right? Of course, the more money that you put into the reserve means that you are basically more secure, right? But then, putting more money into the reserve, this money means that putting money into reserve means that this money you cannot use, right? You cannot use for business activities, right? So when you cannot use this money for business activity, you cannot use this money to generate income, right? So that's why there need to be a balance, right, between putting your money into a reserve, so to speak, and at the same time getting your money to work, right? Your money to work means that giving financing and doing investment and stuff, right? So that you can get adequate return from your investment. Okay, the next one is asset quality. Okay, so asset quality. So as a financial entity, a financial institution income source are their financial assets, right? We are not talking about an asset in terms of what we think. We talk about building and houses. No, we talk about financial institution. Their main source of income are their financial assets, right? So income of financial institution is dependent on the state of health of its financial asset, and it is known as asset quality, right? So asset quality as a means the asset quality of institution, which indicate the ability of institution to continue generating revenue, right? So and when we talk about asset quality, right, institution to continue generating revenue, it very much dependent on the counterparty, right? So for example, for banks to continue generating revenue or getting income from their housing loan, for example, housing financing, for example, the counterparty, which is the people who are paying for their housing financing, must be in good shape, right? So if the pandemic happened and these people could not pay for their housing financing installment, so the asset quality of the banks will drop, right? Similarly, the banks give financing to corporation, for example, companies, right? Construction companies, right? And then or maybe oil and gas company, for example, right? So the bank gives financing to oil and gas company at a good time, right? When the price of oil is at $70 or $80 per barrel, right? Suddenly the price of oil drop, right? Becomes $20, $30 per barrel, right? Of course, this would affect the performance of the oil and gas company, right? They would have less revenue, right? So and potentially they could get into losses, right? So when they have less revenue, they could get into losses. They would have a problem of paying the banks and honoring their financial obligations, right? So now we talk about counterparty risk here, right? The risk of other party that would affect the performance of the bank, right? So of course, when this happens, the asset quality of the banks will go down, right? Next is the management quality, right? So financial is the IFI, Islamic financial institution or financial institution, so to speak. They are run by a group of personnel which form the management team, right? So the power entrusted in management team can be in the form of executive or non-executive powers, right? So this is quite a jargon being used here, right? So executive powers means that you can make direct decision, right? So for example, CEOs and head of departments, right? So you have what we call DAL, right? Discretionary authority limits, right? What you can decide based on your DAL, right? And then you can also have non-executive powers, right? For example, BODs and shareholders, right? They can make decision, right? Of course, they would make decision, right? But it would involve a certain amount and would involve it depends on they have their things to decide, right? If for example lower than 100 million, for example, it can be decided based by the executive, right? If more than that, only the and then the BODs and shareholders can come in, right? So management quality determines the success of company in executing its business strategy, right? Is a combination of skill sets and experience of both shareholders and top management would play important roles in managing operational and strategic risks, right? So these two key risks, operational and strategic risks, right? So in a stress situation, for example, in recession or in a not good time, so to speak, the financial commitment of shareholders is of paramount importance in mitigating liquidity risk, right? For example, liquidity risk is a big issue as well, right? Especially for the financial institution, right? Liquidity risk means, in simpler words, whether you have enough money, right? Enough money in circulation, right? Of course, if you total up everything, you have money, right? Because you have this particular asset and that particular asset, right? But your asset might not be liquid enough, right? You cannot sell your asset right now and get that particular amount, right? For example, banks A have an asset of 100 million in Sukuk, right? Right, so they recorded 100 million in Sukuk, right? Tomorrow, suddenly things happen, people need more money, right? They need to pay 20 million, so to speak, to their creditors, right? Just 20 million, right? But they have 100 million in asset, right? But this 100 million, they cannot sell it directly, right? Because if they sell directly, they would get lower amount, right? Maybe 80 million or 70 million, which would make them loss, right? So and even they want to sell at 70 or 80 million, they might not find suitors to buy this particular asset because you want it to be immediate, right? So there are liquidity, you have the money technically, right? But you don't have the money, right? In other words, there are liquidity issues there, right? So these will come the shareholders, right? So the shareholders usually they would have their own savings, or they can get financing directly from other banks. For example, they can put a collateral, so to speak, and this could mitigate the liquidity risk. Okay. And the fourth one is the earnings. So the earnings of a financial institution are generally measured against their profitability, cost structure, and sensitivity to market movement. Okay. So the past track record of profitability can be indicator of future performance, right? It can be indicator of future performance, but it might not be 100% true, right? So being in the financial market, financial institution performance is dependent on the interest rate movement, right? So interest rate, although we talk about Islamic financial institution 100% free from interest, right? But they are risk of interest rate. They are exposed to the risk of interest rate, right? And this is referred to in Islamic in financial institution context as a market risk, right? So and in the business model dependent on asset to produce recurring income, institution earnings are also subject to credit risk, right? So there are also other financial risks such as liquidity and operational risks that cannot be underestimated in influencing institution financial performance, although they may not be directly linked to the nature of financial performance, right? And the final one is the L, liquidity, right? So liquidity refers to institution ability to liquidate assets to cover any unexpected call of its liability at a desired time and cost, right? So for example, in the event of a sudden run in the bank, right? This is called bank run, right? So maybe after this you can Google into what is a bank run, right? So in the event of sudden run in the bank, ample liquidity will ensure all demands for deposit withdrawal can be satisfied, right? So a bank's short-term liquidity can be in the form of cash holding, money market placement with other financial institutions, or good quality investment securities. Okay, so and the bank's access to alternative funding sources is also a determinant of its ability to meet liquidity crisis. So and this represents short-term assets, liquidity risk, which is also correlates with credit and market risk. Okay, and then there are two factors that are often associated with liquidity risk, which is time and cost, right? We discussed earlier about the need to sell at a particular time, right? So timing there is important, and cost, right? So you get a lower amount of your asset if you want to sell it immediately, for example, right? So there need to be a balance there, right? Okay. So this is a summary, right, of CAMEL components and type of risk associated with it, right? So for example, capital adequacy related with strategic business risk and also Sharia risk, right? In other words, Sharia risk is available in all type of risks, right? Asset quality is associated with credit risk, liquidity risk, and also Sharia risk again. Management quality associated with strategy or business risk, operational risk, liquidity risk, Sharia risk again. Earnings are associated with market risk and credit risk, and liquidity, market risk, and credit risk. Okay. So this is an example of references that you could look into. That's all for this week. We shall continue again in another chapter next week, inshallah. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.